Wow, wow. That's a reference to Keke Palmer. Finally, we have a lighthearted video. The last few videos have felt like I'm fighting for my life. I don't know, it's felt very serious. So even though Wicked came out in November of last year, people are still talking about it. It's still very much on top of everyone's minds. Why? Well, because first of all, the promotions for Wicked lasted for so long, and now we're waiting for part 2 of Wicked the movie, which comes out I think also in November of this year, 2025. And regardless of if you liked the movie or if you like musicals in general, Wicked no doubt became a sensation ever since it came out. And it pushed a lot of people to check out the original book by Gregory Maguire. It is actually the first book in a 4-book series from him, and this one is called Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, of which I happen to have a copy. I have this like deluxe edition, sprayed edges. This is a Bible. It feels so big and thick. The audiobook was 20 hours. It took me forever to finish it. But I have finally made it through the entire book. And as a lot of people have already complained on the internet, the book is nothing like the musical. Everyone assumed that since Ariana Grande was in the movie, that the book it was based off of would then be kid-friendly, to which people then bought the book. And granted, people were buying the paperback version that had the movie poster on it, so it had her face. And there were like kids versions of the Wicked books coming out. I know like Little Golden Books had one with Alphaba and Glinda, and those are kid-friendly. But obviously, Wicked, the actual book, is not. So a lot of people were in for a rude awakening. And I knew that prior to getting into this book. I knew it was not going to be like the movie, but I just kind of wanted to see the differences and how they took the original source material and adapted it into the musical and eventually the movie. Because there have been so many like spin-offs and reiterations. Obviously, this book was inspired by the original The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz movie was inspired by, I'm so sorry, I forget the dude's name. And he's from Chicago. I'm so embarrassed. And that movie was inspired by the children's book series written by L. Frank Baum from Chicago. Speaking of children's books, I'm also wearing this really cute sweater. I wanted to show you guys because it's not visible from where I'm sitting, but look, it's Frog and Toad. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. First of all, I'm just going to tell you, if you read this book, it will be confusing. I have not partaken in any extracurricular activities. I have not dabbled in any kind of substances, but you know, reading this book I feel like is the closest I'll ever get. Some parts were just weird. So I'm going to give you really a lightning round of everything that is in Wicked. I'm not going to do any like hard-hitting analysis. This is really just going to be like for funsies. Because quite frankly, I've just been putting out so many videos where I have to hold people accountable. You know, doing those research-heavy videos is great, is fine, and I enjoy doing it. But sometimes I just need a little giggle. I need a little stress reliever, if you will. This will be a very much like conversational kind of video. So, you know, just feel free to like listen. You don't have to think too hard for this. You know, this week has been really hard and I want to have a laugh. I want to giggle with the girlies a little bit. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to give you a very, 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 very basic rundown of Wicked. So first off, the Land of Oz has some fucking lore. So as I already mentioned, I have the special deluxe edition of this book, which comes with a very helpful map. Let me just open that up for you. You see how intricate this world is, and we only ever get to see the Emerald City and Shiz University. This is a fully fleshed world building right here. This scares me whenever I open up a book, because I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to be thinking. God. So at the start of the book, the kind of background is that the wizard is not there at the start. When Elphaba is born, they're ruled by the Ozma regent. So they essentially have like a queen of Oz. And throughout Elphaba's lifetime, as she grows up through the book, is when the wizard first appears and he rises to power. We even have religions in this book where the main one, or at least the one that we hear the most about, is the Unionist faith. That's the most similar to like Christianity, where they have the unnamed God and, you know, they go on mission trips, They're like essentially, it's Christianity. Elphaba and Nessarose's father, Frex, is a unionist minister. They also have different races of people. So of course there's the Munchkinlanders, but they're also the Quadlings and the Gillicanese. Those are the main three that we hear about. I think there's other ones, but again, I can only hold so much information in my brain at once. Since Frex is a minister, he's constantly traveling to preach the word of the unnamed God, and he leaves Melina alone. When the story opens up, she is pregnant, but she talked about how when he would leave her alone at home, she would entertain visitors that would come through because she was essentially like living in bum nowhere, and she was just looking for some excitement in her life. Anyway, Melina is a character, to say the least. So at the start of the book, Frex is doing his preaching, and he's trying to dissuade people from looking at the clock of the time dragon. It's this weird like side puppet show. Okay, I am not gonna lie. There is a lot of the stuff that I read in this book I just did not get. I did not understand. I've tried it. I tried reading it so many times. I don't know how intelligent you guys think I am based on my analysis of other books, but sometimes there are some books that just get me where I don't get it. So what I interpreted this Clock of the Time Dragon to be is essentially this like puppet show, and he thinks it's essentially like blasphemous, so he's trying to get people to not watch the show. He eventually goes to this different town where the clock shows up, and they put on a cute little puppet show of a corrupt minister and his devil child, and they all assume it's Frex, so they try to kill him. Meanwhile, back at home, Melina is going into labor. These two women find her and they're like, okay, well, we have to help her. Melina gives birth on the back of like a carriage, kind of, and out comes Miss Elphaba in all her green glory. Now, the women are like, why is she green? But that's not even the worst of it, because one of the women is like, giving Elphaba her little finger, just like, playing with babies, right? And Elphaba bites her finger off. It was at that moment that I realized that Wicked the book is so very different from Wicked the movie. So they leave Melina and Elphaba, obviously, because she just took that woman's finger, and everyone is terrified of her. Then Frex brings his nanny to come and cure Elphaba of her greenness, but it doesn't work, sadly, and Melina tells Nanny of this mysterious stranger that came by the house way before Elphaba was born, way before she was pregnant, and he showed up and gave her this green elixir. Sounds familiar, right? The problem is that Melina doesn't remember too much of what happened afterward, because the green elixir, after she drank it, like, she just lost her memory essentially. But Nanny decides not to tell Frex, and everyone is just like, okay, well, we have a green baby, I guess we have to raise her. Then a stranger comes by the house, and it's a man from Quadling country. He's a Quadling. Anyway, he comes by and he is able to like blow glass, and Melina is just like completely taken by him, and she ends up having a little affair with him, but then he decides to like stay with them permanently. And it isn't revealed until like the very end of the book, but I will just say now that it ended up being a little throuple of Melina, Frex, and the Quadling. His name is Turtleheart. Then, as Elphaba grows up, they realize that she can't speak, so they try to socialize her with other children, but she is still, viciously biting people. I cannot make this clear enough. In the first part of this book, Elphaba is fucking terrifying. There's a scene where I think Turtleheart gives her like a bird, and she literally holds it in her little toddler hands, her little chubby toddler hands, and bites the fucking head of that bird. I wonder why they didn't put that in the movie. So Turtleheart is now living with Frex, Melina, Elphaba, and Nanny, and they start asking him about Quadling country, and he essentially tells them that he had to leave because they were constructing the Yellow Brick Road, which at first no one in Oz fucking wanted that road, but they were building it in Quadling country as like, oh yeah, you can get to Oz. But really what they were doing is trying to dig up into their land because they had a natural deposit of rubies. This portion with Turtleheart does have a lot of good commentary about progress and control, and how Oz is using the Yellow Brick Road to essentially pillage their land under the guise of progress. And he even kind of slays by saying that there is always a perceived threat from the outside as like a foreigner, but really the threat is always homegrown. Also in this conversation, they find out that Melina is pregnant, but Nanny and everyone is terrified because they're like, we don't want her to come out green again. So Nanny, in preparation, went to the Emerald City, got these weird mysterious pills and tells Melina, take these will prevent the baby from coming out green. Also in this portion, Elphaba utters her first word, which is horrors, and Turtleheart claims that Elphaba had a vision and that she was able to foresee a man coming down in a balloon from the sky and the fall of the Ozma rain. So there are a lot of like bad omens when this first part starts. But then we jump to part 2, which is Glinda. Now everyone is in their like teenage era. Elphaba has grown up, but we are in Galinda's perspective. Galinda in this book is Gillicanese, so she's essentially like of a higher social status than everyone else. At this point, the wizard is also gaining more power in Oz. At this point, Glinda is 17 years old and she's headed to Shiz University. On the train, she meets Dr. Dillamond. You remember him, he is the talking goat from the movie. Now, Glinda happens to be alone on the train because her, we'll say like nanny, they call her Amma Clutch, but essentially like every girl has to be accompanied by like a chaperone, and that's who Amma Clutch was. But she hurt her foot, like she stepped on a nail, so she had to go see the doctor, so she sent Glinda by herself. So she meets Dr. Dillamond and he asks her about animal rights, because there's a difference between capital A, animal, and lowercase a, animals. Animals are the ones that are able to talk and they have like a consciousness, and animals are just, you know, like regular non-talking animals. A lot of repetition here, I'm so sorry. Because apparently the wizard was trying to ban animal travel, and Dr. Dillamond was like, you know, if that ban goes through, like I can't travel on this train, and I'm a professor at Shiz University. He's like, do you think that's fair? And Glinda's like, I don't know, and I don't care. So Glinda makes it to Shiz University, but because she showed up without her chaperone, Madame Morrible, yes, she's here too, tells her that she's gonna have to be in like a group home, essentially with like all these other girls. And Glinda's like, no, I'm rich, I deserve to have my own room. But Madame Morrible's like, no, you can't, you need a chaperone. So she has to end up rooming with Elphaba. Essentially, there was just like an uneven number of girls, and Madame Morrible was like, okay, well, we can wait until your Amma Clutch comes now that she's done with the doctor, but you are gonna have to room with Elphaba, like you can't be by yourself. But at this point in the story, Elphaba is like almost completely normal. Like she's very quiet and reserved, but she's definitely not biting off any fingers or heads anymore. And at this point in the story, everything is like pretty close to the movie, where Elphaba and Glinda just like aren't getting along, and it's mostly on Glinda's part because she's like very snobby. But they do have a conversation where Elphaba kind of talks about her background, that her father's a unionist, and they talk about religion, and she is getting Glinda to start thinking. Then they are invited to a slam poetry kind of night with Madame Morrible and the other students, and she starts performing poetry, and it's this like really weird format where it's like she says a poem that is generally meaningless and the real message is just in that last line. So she gives a poem where she just says like a whole bunch of whatever. I'm not gonna say it's nonsense because there is like something to glean from it. I don't understand poetry. That is my crux. I really cannot get it. Like I don't know what it is. It is too beyond what my little pea brain can understand. But so she gives her poem, and then the last line is, animals should be seen, not heard. So Dr. Dillamond, who is there at the slam poetry night, kind of gets up and he's like, oh, you are absolutely not trying to deliver propaganda and try to pass it off as poetry, are you? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just citing poetry. Why are you making it all about politics? So he gets mad and then he leaves, and then they decide to end poetry night because, you know, trying to advocate for taking away someone's rights really just puts a damper on the mood. But then also at this event, we meet Bach, who happened to know Elphaba. He was one of the neighborhood kids that they tried to socialize her with when she was like a toddler and, you know, still biting people's heads off. And she tries to pretend not to know him and just like avoids him throughout most of the story, or at least most of this part of the story. That's what I meant to say. Over the next few days, Dr. Dillamond and Elphaba are trying to get Glinda to start thinking. And specifically, he's starting to question the students about animal rights and whether they think that he has them. So they're trying to get her to see outside of herself, but it is an uphill battle. Then we are put into Bach's perspective a little bit. And of course, like the movie, he is like super obsessed with Glinda. She's just very pretty, very demure, and he likes her. So one day he kind of sneaks into the vegetable garden of their dorm, and Elphaba catches him and he's like, I'm sorry, I really wanted to see Glinda. And she's like, oh yeah, I can totally help you talk to her. Elphaba looks like she's being wingman of the year, but really she is just trying to make fun of Bach. So she brings down Glinda and she's like, why did you take me to see a man? This is so improper. So Glinda has to break it to Bach of like, listen, dude, I don't even know you. I don't know why you're obsessed with me. It's never gonna happen. Literally obliterates that man, as she should. But then we're in the summertime. It's over summer break. Everyone has left Shiz except for Elphaba and Bach. Bach is doing like a summer job where he's organizing these books in the library, and Elphaba is working for Dr. Dillamond. Dr. Dillamond is doing research to prove that humans and animals are the same, because he's like, the reason that they are oppressing animals and the reason that they're putting all these laws into effect is because they think biologically that animals, capital A animals, the ones that can speak, and humans are different. So he is trying to prove on a biological level that they are the same, because he thinks that if he does that, then these laws can't stand. So Elphaba runs into Bach and eventually enlists him to help her and Dr. Dillamond. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but Shiz is like heavily segregated, despite the fact that Shiz is the only university in Oz that accepts female students. Their education is definitely not on any level close to a boy's education. They have different courses, different teachers, different libraries. And the library that Elphaba is able to access, the ladies' library, if you will, just doesn't have the same resources as the men's library. So she has Bach gather some materials for her so that she can give it to Dr. Dillamond. Because at this point in the story, the civil unrest is kind of like ramping up. The wizard has fully taken power over Oz, and he's eliminated any government entities that could check him, you know, checks and balances, and eliminated anyone that could threaten his position of power. Really funny that they talk about that. Really strange and really not in any way applicable to real life. Like at all. I don't know where this came from. It's definitely not inspired by any real life events. I don't know. Bach also notices that there is not only a lack of animals on campus, but in the surrounding city. Like they go out to bars and stuff, and where there used to be just like animals going for their daily stroll or having a little cup of tea, now there's none. So needless to say, this research is now more necessary than ever. Summer break comes and goes, and they are working with Dr. Dillamond, but there haven't been a lot of real groundbreaking evidence that they found to support that animals and humans are the same. But he is making strides, make no mistake. And one day, Bach sees all the girls coming from the dorm in tears. He finds Galinda, who says that her Amma Clutch has fallen ill, that the night before, as they were all getting ready for bed, Amma Clutch noticed that the light in Dr. Dillamond's office was still on, but she saw something weird. So she goes down, but she never came back. They find out that she went crazy, and the reason she did is because she saw Dr. Dillamond's dead body. Yeah, our beloved goat friend, our beloved Dr. Dillamond, was murdered. The story was that he accidentally fell on the edge of like a looking glass or something. Essentially that it was an accident. But Elphaba and company, they don't think that that was the case. They think he was murdered for his research. And while Elphaba is worried about that, Glinda is more preoccupied with the fact that Amma Clutch is now out of commission. And Madame Morrible is like, well, if you don't have a chaperone, you're gonna have to go to the shared dormitories. And that is Glinda's worst nightmare. She's like, I cannot live in a communal space. I need my private suite. And Elphaba is the one to come and clutch here, and she sends for her nanny to come to Shiz. And who does she bring with her? Miss Nessarose. So we meet Nessarose. She comes out of the carriage and, you know, she's not green. So that's already a plus. Everyone's like, oh my God, she's like chill, she's normal. But then they realize that she's kind of like stumbling as she's walking. And it becomes apparent that the reason she's not able to walk very well is because she can't keep her balance because she doesn't have arms. So other than the fact that Nessarose doesn't have arms, she's also a religious extremist. Like she has religious mania is what they call it. And funny enough, no one really likes her because of that. They all think she's very like hoity-toity, uptight, just really has a stick in her ass about religion. And now that Nessarose is here, Glinda seems like a much better person compared to her, because now Glinda is different. She's starting to think, she's starting to have like human empathy for other people. And even she is tired of Nessarose and her preaching behavior. We also get more backstory on Elphaba and how her life changed after Nessarose was born, and just like getting more of that chunk that we don't get in the book. So we find out that Melina, their mom, didn't actually die in childbirth when she was giving birth to Nessarose. She died giving birth to their younger brother. Yes, they have a younger brother. His name is Shell. Now, Shell sounds very similar to Turtle Heart. You know, turtles have shells. Is there a correlation here? Yet to be confirmed, at least in this part, but he is 100% the child of Turtle Heart. And they try to like ask about Shell without coming across as insensitive, but Elphaba confirms that he was born, quote, male, white, and whole. They talk more about Quadling country because they ended up moving there after Nessarose was born so that Frex could convert more of the Quadlings. And Elphaba talks a little bit about how she literally witnessed the oppression of the Quadlings and how they were massacred by the wizard. She drops a banger line in this chapter saying, "It's a systematic marginalizing of populations, Glinda. That's what the wizard is all about." Also, I forgot to mention, in this chapter, like the movie, in honor of Dr. Dillamond, Glinda decides to change her name to just Glinda because he couldn't pronounce that extra A in Galinda, so she just goes by Glinda in his honor. Now with Nessarose, everyone goes back to their normal class activities. They are in this class of natural sciences, is what they call it, and we meet Fiyero, my man, my one and only. Poor man was brutalized on his first day there, and we also find out that he is actually a man of color, and he has blue diamonds tattooed all over his body. So he's pretty cool. I think Fiyero is pretty cool. I love Fiyero, actually. So on the first day of class, he arrives late and is berated by the teacher, and then the next day, the teacher brings in a lion cub. You see this? You get this? You know where I'm going here? Yeah? Okay. So he brings the cub so that they can experiment on it, and funny enough, the whole class is in an uproar. They're like, "You can't do this. This is inhumane. What is wrong with you? You need to leave." So they try to like distract him, and then these two girls, not Elphaba and Fiyero, end up kidnapping the lion cub and setting it in the wild. Elphaba is still very much shaken up by this incident, but yeah, she's not the one that's leading the charge in freeing the lion cub, and everyone is very much against this torturing of an animal. Also in this chapter is when Nessarose gets her shoes, and it's really sad because Elphaba's like, "Oh my god, my father hates me." There's a lot more that happens in this portion of the book, but honestly, I am just like, I can't remember all of it, and I'm really just focusing on the most important points. I'm sorry. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, and Amaclutch is dying. She is succumbing to her injuries. Glinda is in tears. Obviously, that is her Amaclutch. So she tries to heal her because she is now a sorceress. Rather, she's studying sorcery, and she's honestly kind of good at it. Like, she has an affinity for it, which is different from the movie because obviously we see that little scene where Glinda can't change her dress into a ball gown, but no, she does not struggle in the book. So she tries to heal Amaclutch, but all she's able to do is kind of like bring her back to her sanity. Elphaba questions Amaclutch and is like, "Okay, who actually killed Dr. Dillamond?" And they find out that it was one of Madame Morrible's henchmen. His name is Grammatic, and I think it's like a little robot thing. So she reveals the truth and then unfortunately dies. They hold a funeral for Amaclutch, and it was really funny because they point out that Madame Morrible really cheaped out on the funeral. Like, she laid out coffee and tea, but no creamer or sugar, and everyone is like, "How dare you?" Like, what's wrong with you? This is the bare minimum. But so they're not really satisfied with the funeral service, so they end up going to a bar to pour one out for Amaclutch. And then in their grief, they're like, "We're gonna go to the philosophy club." And you know, that might sound like it's a real cute, fun activity. How do I put this? They have orgies there. When I started this channel, I didn't think I was gonna say that word as often as I've said it. Why is that in so many different books? And it's always in the books I never expect. There's a whole chapter dedicated to that. I'm not gonna talk about it. One, because it makes me uncomfortable. I am a little bit squeamish, if you will. Those kinds of things do make me a little red, make me a little embarrassed to talk about. And just objectively, it's fucking weird. I don't like it. So while most of the boys in the group, including Bach, decide to go to the philosophy club, Elphaba's like, I'm gonna go see the wizard. And Glinda's like, you can't just go see the wizard. And she's like, well, maybe not by myself. We are gonna go see the wizard. So they embark to the Emerald City. They manage to get an audience with the wizard, who is kind of like, he appears to them as like a skeleton. He doesn't show, obviously, his real form to them. He is trying to come across as big scary wizard, of course. So Elphaba tries to tell him about Dr. Dillamon's research and about like what happened to him, and the wizard does not care. He could not care less about Dr. Dillamond and the animals. So he refuses to talk about the research and entertain their little protest, but they manage to leave unscathed. Like, they thought they were gonna die going to see the wizard and going to question him, but they leave unscathed. So Elphaba sends Glinda back to Shiz, and Glinda's like, why aren't you gonna come with me? We have to go back to school. And Elphaba's like, no, I can't leave it like this. I have to fight for the animals. I have to fight the wizard. So she sends Glinda off back to Shiz with a kiss. They kiss on the lips. This is full canon. They kiss each other. So anyone that's trying to be like, oh my god, Glinda and Elphaba like aren't in love, like stop being gay. Denial is a river in Egypt. Your husband is gay. Then we flash forward. Everyone has graduated from Shiz. We are now in Fiero's perspective. He finds himself in the Emerald City, and while he's in this cute little church praying to the Saint Galinda, and he sees a mysterious figure, and he's like, oh my god, there's only one person I know that has green skin. This has to be Elphaba. So they run into each other, and she's like, we can't be associated with each other. Essentially, she's a part of this like underground resistance, if you will, and she doesn't want him getting mixed up in it, but he is like, no, we're friends. I'm gonna talk to you. He doesn't want her to like live a life of solitude, so he keeps her company, and while they're, having polite conversation in her apartment, they decide to have their little love affair. At first, it's just, hooking up, but then it progresses, and, they really have genuine, deep love for each other. So at this point in the story, we're catching up with everyone. We already know that Elphaba is kind of like an activist. She's working underground. She's like a spy, if you will. She goes by the name Faye. Fiero has a wife and children, although it was mentioned like when he was first introduced that he already had a wife. Essentially, she was like a child bride, which is not fun, but that they were like essentially promised to each other, and she wouldn't like live up to those actual wife roles until they were older. So at least there's that. We're clearing the bare minimum bar right here. But now they're adults, so they have their actual full-on married lives together. They have 3 children. His wife and his children are living in this place, Kiamo Ko. It is away from the Emerald City, very far actually. And originally he was there for business, but then he decided to stay because he's in love with Elphaba. Nessarose, Glinda, and all their other friends already graduated from Shiz. They do mention their one friend, Croak, I think it was. It was one of those like side characters we don't hear a lot about, but homeboy went crazy after going to the philosophy club and having an orgy at the end of the last part. Literally lost his mind. Glinda is now a full-blown sorceress, and Elphaba is kind of worried that she might be working with Madame Morrible, but she doesn't know for sure. As Fiero and Elphaba continue their love affair, Fiero's like, okay, you need to tell me like what exactly you're doing. I can't handle the suspense. What are you doing in the Emerald City? She reveals to him very begrudgingly that her and her little rebellion are planning on assassinating the wizard, and they're gonna do it on this one holiday known as Lurleen. Hold on, give me a second. The L's are messing me up here. Lurleen-miss, which is, I'm gonna say, a stand-in for Christmas. Again, Lurleen is this weird fairy goddess that they believe in. The origin of Oz, if you will. She is the basis of a lot of their creation myths. There's even a creation myth on capital A animals that has to do with Lurleen, where essentially she peed out the ocean, and any animal that was able to swim through her stream became animals with consciousness, and the other ones that were not able to swim through became animals, as in degular livestock. It's really weird. I wasn't gonna talk about it initially, but it was too weird to not mention. So leading up to Lurleen-Miss, Fiyero meets up with Glinda, and she's like, oh my god, I wonder how Elphaba's doing, because Nessarose is also in town apparently as well. And poor guy has to lie about not seeing Elphaba, even though he knows that their dear friends want to reunite with her. He has to keep her existence a secret. Then it's Lurleen-Miss. It's the day that everything is going to go down. He is in the crowd. He's kind of like looking around, seeing if he can find the spies in the crowd. And then they think the wizard is coming out to greet everyone, but it's actually Madame Morrible. The wizard is not gonna be there, even though he was rumored to attend this event. So he's like, oh man, their plan went to shit. I need to check on Elphaba. So he goes to her apartment, but little does he know that someone else is waiting for him there. When he walks in, he is greeted by the wizard's military police known as the Gale Force. So they ambush him and they're like, you are a spy. You are involved in the rebellion, the uprising against the wizard. And they beat him to death. Yes. Unfortunately, our dear Fiyero is murdered in his own love nest. I was devastated. I was crying. I'm like, you can't take it from me like this. And then poor Elphaba goes back to her apartment, finds him, and just completely shatters. She ends up on the door of like a monastery, if you will, a nunnery. This girl is covered in his blood, completely just like out of it. And she's taken in by this weird lady named Mother Yackle. Remember the name Mother Yackle. Then we go into the part titled Into the Vincus, and we are now a few years after this event on Lurleen-Miss. Elphaba is healed and she is being sent away by the monastery to go visit Fiyero's hometown of Kiamoko. The reason she wants to go is because she wants to apologize to his wife, Sarima, for indirectly being involved in his death. She is accompanied by this small child, this small boy. His name is Lear. Now, when the people that are leading the trip to the Vincus ask her about this kid, she's like, I don't know who he is. He's just here. Don't ask questions. And at first you read it and you're like, okay, why is she acting so weird? Like, this kid's just here. He's just vibes. He's a little cutie. Why is she being so mean to him? Well, as a little spoiler, because she doesn't own up to this until later, but it's very much in the subtext, Lear is her son with Fiyero. Yes, our dear Wicked Witch of the West is a mother. On the journey, Elphaba starts realizing that she has like a magical affinity, like she can use magic even though she's not doing it intentionally, because she's fighting with the other passengers about like animals and their consciousness and stuff. And specifically, she's arguing with the cook of this voyage because he keeps like talking about cooking animals. And she's like, how do you know that this is an animal and not an animal, capital A? Like, how do you know you're killing the right creature and you're not accidentally murdering one that has consciousness? And he's like, I don't care, meat is meat. So she got so mad that she accidentally used magic to set a swarm of bees on him. So she is like Snow White on this journey, just like collecting animal companions. She has a horde of bees that follows her, along with this baby monkey named Chistery. Eventually, she does make it to Kiamoko with Lear and her new magical companions. She also befriends a dog named Killjoy. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, it might be a parallel to Dorothy making friends with the lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Man. And Dorothy has a dog, and now Elphaba has a dog. Oh my god. Nobody can talk to me. I am playing chess. Everyone else is playing checkers. Something just clicked in my brain, but I don't have the time to analyze that. Just know that I'm throwing that out there. They're parallels. Okay, so they make it to Kiamoko. They meet Sarima, and Elphaba is immediately trying to be like, hey, you know your husband, Fiyero, who hasn't come home in years? Not only is he dead, but I may or may not have been part of the reason he died. And Sarima's like, no. We're not going to talk about this. I don't want to talk about my dead husband. Thank you. But Miss Sarima is a very lovely, very demure woman. So of course she takes in Elphaba and Lear, and they just kind of cohabit Kiamoko. It's very interesting how easy they are to just like slide into this new living situation. So Sarima's sisters, who are all named after numbers, tell Elphaba that the reason that Sarima doesn't really want to talk about it is because they think that Fiyero was a spy, which is what the Gale Force had originally accused him of. But they also believe that he was having an affair with Glinda, and she's not super happy about it, which is why she doesn't want to talk about it. And Elphaba's like, ooh girl, if only you knew. While Elphaba is at Kiamoko, Kyamoko, she also finds this magical book in their home, and it happens to be the Grimoire. So Sarima tells her that a stranger also came through Kyamoko before they did and was like, can you just hold on to this book for me? And she was like, okay, completely forgot about it until Elphaba found it. She's like, you can, play around with it, whatever. I don't care. I can't read what it says. So while Elphaba is at Kyamoko, she hears back about her sister, Nessarose. Because surprise, Nanny went to go find her because she's like, girl, you've been missing for years. You didn't think I was gonna check up on you? She caught wind that Elphaba was here, so she's like, I have to check on my lovely child. So she kind of gives her the rundown that now Nessarose has risen to power as the Eminent Throp, which is like the title that Elphaba was supposed to inherit, but because she wasn't there anymore, they gave the title to Nessarose. Essentially, she holds some kind of like noble title, we'll say. Something like that, whatever. But the people of Nest Hardings don't like her very much. And apparently, Glinda went to go visit Nessarose and enchanted her shoes to help her maintain her balance. Because unfortunately, the way that they characterize disability in this book is that Nessarose, the person with a disability in this book, is a burden on other people. Like, it's very literal, very on the nose that she has to lean on people because she can't support herself, which of course dehumanizes people with disabilities and implies that they can't live independent lives. Or worse, that needing help from others is a burden and like a character flaw, which is of course just like incredibly ableist. And I'm so glad that we have seen so many iterations of Wicked that have completely changed this narrative. Like, the adaptation from Wicked the book into the musical is still very reliant on these ableist themes, which is why it's so great that we're getting Wicked the movie, because then you have actual representation from an actress that is disabled, and you're getting to hear from the actual community about how they would like to be represented in media. Because we see this evolution with Nessarose as a character who, I'm gonna say, like, for the most part, in each iteration is meant to be an unlikable character, but in each time, it's for different reasons. Where in Wicked the book, she's very much unlikable because of her disability. Even though they're not saying it directly, that's what you get in the subtext, and that's what you glean from it when you read the book. Whereas Nessarose in the movie is unlikable, but for very complex reasons. You understand the societal pressures that she is under, and how much importance she puts on how people see her and wanting to be liked by others, and basically her trying to assimilate into societal norms, and how her journey into that is hindered by Elphaba because she is so unapologetically herself. So she has so much complexities, and what makes her unlikable has everything to do with her actions, with her character, and nothing to do with her disability. So I'm really happy that we're getting that in the movie. And I'm just kind of sad that I have to relive the horrible days in reading this book, because Nessarose gets these shoes and she's able to kind of keep balance. She literally doesn't have to rely on anyone anymore. And in gaining her independence, she kind of turns into the Wicked Witch of the East. She's characterized almost as being like a dictator. Like, nobody really likes her in power. Her father even insinuates that the shoes are dangerous because they give her too much power, which that is its own can of worms. But the only thing I'm gonna choose to focus on is that Elphaba comes out with a banger line saying that they can call her the Wicked Bitch of the East. That's funny. I'm sorry, that's funny. Just a little bit. Also, at this time, the wizard sent some of his soldiers to station themselves at Kyamoko, and Elphaba's the only one that is like, this is weird. She's like, why are we quartering soldiers in times of peace? Like, what is the wizard doing? Nobody else thinks it's weird, and they're gaslighting the hell out of her. Also, at this point, Elphaba came to Kyamoko with a broom that was given to her by this woman that took her in at the monastery. Her name was Mother Yakel, if you remember. And one of the kids takes the broom and accidentally goes for a little flying magical ride. And that's how Elphaba learns that the broom is actually able to fly. So she learns how to use it, and then she's like, I'm gonna go visit my sister. So she goes to visit Nessarose, kind of like get a layout of her day-to-day. So Elphaba is kind of worried for Nessa because she is still a violent religious extremist and she is just not liking where this is going. She doesn't like the future of Nest Hardings. But then she decides to go back to Kyamoko, and when she does, she finds out that Sarima, her sisters, and her children have all been kidnapped by the wizard. So things are ramping up as we get to the very last part of the story. And here is where Miss Dorothy comes into play. So this section starts with Dorothy's house landing on Nessarose and she dies. They hold a funeral for her and Elphaba has to return back to Munchkinland to attend, and she meets up with Glinda. At this point, there's a lot of tension between Munchkinland and Oz because Munchkinland is trying to secede from the Union, and there's talks of reannexation. It's very like political chess is going on in Munchkinland. You would never know by watching The Wizard of Oz. So Glinda was there when Dorothy came down, obviously, as we know, and Glinda is recounting to Elphaba that she sent her to the wizard because she's like, I don't know what the hell a Kansas is, but he probably does. And they were worried that the Munchkinlanders would see Dorothy as like a political figure and use her as a pawn in their game. And she was like, well, I had to get her out while this civil unrest kind of unfolds because everyone's pretty happy that Nessa died, but now there's a vacuum. Now there is no one in power, so who knows what the fate of Munchkinland is. And then Glinda drops the bombshell. She's like, I felt so bad for this poor sweet innocent child that I gave her Nessa's shoes as just like a good luck charm. And Elphaba is like, you did what? Because in Elphaba's point of view, those shoes are very symbolic to the Munchkinlanders because they gave Nessarose so much independence and they were like a symbol of her power that she's worried that if Dorothy goes to the wizard and he sees the shoes, that he will then use the shoes to kind of rally the Munchkinlanders and get them on his side. And then also part of her is like, those are my sister's shoes. This girl killed my sister and you gave her the shoes? And then also they just represent the kind of like insecurity that Elphaba feels because her dad obviously favored Nessa and they were given to her as a gift of like, you know, to enhance the beauty that you so naturally have. So Elphaba was a little jealous. And yeah, you know, sue her. She wanted the shoes. They weren't Glinda's to give away. So Elphaba's like, now I gotta go get these damn shoes. And they part ways forever. But then the wizard requests an audience with Elphaba. At this audience, Elphaba is like, I need you to release the prisoners that you stole from Kyamoko, Fiero's family. In exchange, she shows him a piece of paper that she took from the Grimmery. And then he reveals that the Grimmery is from his world, the human world. And he's like, if you give me the whole book, I will give you one of the prisoners. So she sees one of Sarima's children, her name is Noor, and she is just like decrepit. She is a skeleton. And Elphaba's like, okay, well, where's the rest of the family? And the wizard's like, they're dead. So Elphaba is mad. She's like, absolutely not. Because originally the wizard wanted the Grimmery to see if he could, you know, leave Oz and go back home. But he's like, well, you see, I came to this magical world and you guys hailed me as a god. So why would I want to leave now? I've built up my empire. I can't leave while the going's good. Elphaba decides not to take the deal and she embarks on the rest of her journey. She goes back to Shiz, finds Madame Morrible, who is literally on her deathbed, and brutally murders her. But then she meets back up with Averick, who is this like side character that honestly is a little bit more coded to the Fiero in the movie of just like very like cocky and like the center of attention. And Averick tells her about the philosophy club and specifically that he met this woman named Mother Yackle. And suddenly things are clicking for Elphaba because this Mother Yackle person has been in all the important parts of her life, because apparently when Nanny went to the Emerald City to get pills to make sure that Nessarose didn't come out green, they were given to her by this woman that she later remembers is Mother Yackle. So then Averick directs her to this dwarf that was also part of the philosophy club, and he happens to be a part of the Clock of the Time Dragon show. If you'll remember from the beginning of this video, it's really convoluted. I know I'm not explaining this right. I'm so sorry. So Elphaba goes to see this dwarf who puts on a little puppet show of her life. So she gets to see her mother drink the green elixir. She gets to see like all the ups and downs of her life through this Clock of the Time Dragon. And she finds out that the wizard is her father. I know. So she goes back to Kiamo-ko, and her son, Lear, gives her the rundown of Dorothy's trip to the Emerald City. He tells her that Dorothy successfully made it and met the wizard, but he told her that he would not help her until she went to go kill the Wicked Witch of the West. He tells her about her new gang of friends, including the Lion, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man, and how they are now on their way to Kiamo-ko. Elphaba sees them coming across the hill, coming closer to their home. And she's like, I gotta stop him. So Elphaba sends Killjoy, her dog, and all of his little puppies to go stop them. And when the dogs make contact with Dorothy and her friends, the Tin Man, who happens to have an axe with him, decides that the best course of action is to behead all of the dogs. It's a massacre of biblical proportions. Elphaba has to watch as they murder her beloved animals. At some point, as they're getting closer, she's looking at the Scarecrow and she's like, I think that's Fiyero. She like convinces herself that he didn't die. So she's like, okay, I have to find out. I have to make sure it's Fiyero. So she decides to send her bees to go and attack them. So as the bees start swarming Dorothy, they're like, well, we have to protect ourselves from the stings. So they grab onto the Scarecrow, our guy Fiyero, and rip out his insides to use the straw to cover their bodies to protect them from bee stings. They rip him apart, literally, to protect themselves. Elphaba has to watch them do this. Honestly, the more I went through this book, the more I understood Elphaba. If that was me, I would have had the crash out of the century. What do you mean you kill my dogs, rip out the insides of the love of my life, the father of my child? And then to make matters worse, that said child is like, I will protect you, Elphaba, unless you try to hurt Dorothy because she's really pretty and I don't want to hurt her. Dorothy, Miss Girl over here, killed your father. You don't even know the devastation. So they eventually arrive at Kiamo-ko. They are welcomed by Elphaba, Nanny, and Lear. Nanny even sets out food for them. That's how lovingly they were welcomed to Kiamo-ko. Everyone is hostile towards Elphaba because the wizard told them that she killed Madame Morrible, and that's why Dorothy needs to kill her. So Elphaba ends up snatching up Dorothy, bringing her up into a tower, and she's questioning her about the wizard. She's like, he wants the Grimoire, doesn't he? Like, you can't give him this book. Elphaba's asking her like the political questions that she knows about the wizard, and Dorothy is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know, she's very naive. Meanwhile, you have the Lion, the Tin Man, and Lear banging at the door to try and save Dorothy. Even her own son isn't on her side. You carry him for 9 months, you push him out, destroy your body forever, and how do they repay you? By taking up arms against you? Aiding and abetting the enemy? It's a devastation. It's a mother's worst nightmare is what it is. So she is having her big confrontation with Dorothy. She ends up setting the end of her broom on fire, and she's kind of like, you know, pointing it at Dorothy to try and be like, I know you're working with the wizard. What did he tell you? Blah, blah, blah. Like, she's really like thinking that Dorothy is working behind the scenes with the wizard. Poor girl doesn't know what she's talking about. Then the inevitable happens. Elphaba accidentally sets her cape on fire because she was swinging around her broomstick that was on fire. And Miss Dorothy, you know, the sweet ray of sunshine that she is, decided that she wants to help this woman, even though she was previously threatening her. She was like, oh no, I must save you. So she grabs a bucket of water and dumps it on Elphaba. And that is how book 1 ends. This is a longer series, and it probably gets fleshed out in the rest of the 3 books. This first one really like topped off my need for Wicked content. I think I'm good until part 2 comes out. There was just a lot of weird stuff, a lot of twists and turns, a lot of things I didn't understand. Honestly, this book served its purpose. It affirmed that Fiyero is a hottie, that Glinda and Elphaba are lesbians, and that Dorothy is the real villain. She is the most wicked out of this entire cast of characters. Now, I will say, I have not watched the musical Wicked. I know that I look like I have. Everything about me and my personality would indicate that I could tell you the lyrics of every single song to the entire soundtrack of Wicked. No. So I actually have no idea how the movie ends. I don't know what we can expect. impact. I was originally going to use this book to make like a very specific and niche video about how I think they will change the purpose of Nessa's shoes in the movie so that it's not ableist. And I might end up making that, but I really haven't come across the answer myself. I have a few theories, but if you want that longer video, just let me know. Otherwise, I think that's the end of this video. This was such a wild ride for me. This video took 2 days to record, and honestly, thinking back to reading this book, it really did feel like a fever dream. I can't remember being conscious while reading this book. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, only because Elphaba and Glinda kissed. And like, she says that she loves Glinda all the time. So, is it weird? Yeah. Is it something that I think everyone should read at least once? Kind of. Just so you can experience it and see how weird it is. But anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed just kind of having like a brain rot video, like nothing super serious, just like us kind of chilling and gagging together. Take this as a little bit of like a rest video. We'll go back to more hard-hitting content starting next week. I just really needed to clock out for a little bit. I just really needed something fun, something exciting, something I didn't really have to think too hard about. Sue me. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you liked it, if you've read Wicked. Just give me all your thoughts down in the comments below. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bonus points to you if you notice that I'm wearing cute little eye jewels that correspond with the colors of the characters. I worked really hard on this. I put effort into this. If you comment on my little eye jewels, I will respond to you with a cute little heart. So please do that. Thank you.